Okay, wonderful. This is my first Zoom film screening, and it feels like a really nice way to connect with you all from afar. So thank you for tuning in and bearing with us through technical difficulties. We made it work. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we will dive into discussion. Anahkwet, or Guy Reiter, is a traditional Menominee who resides on the Menominee Reservation. He is the executive director of the Menominee Indian Community Organization, Menīkānaehkem. He is a community organizer, activist, author, amateur archaeologist, lecturer, and member of the Menominee Constitutional Task Force. Anahkwet has organized many events to uplift communities and demonstrate the richness of Menominee culture. He has lectured at universities on the connection Menominee Indians have to the Menominee River. He has also written articles for Environmental Health News and others. Anahkwet is an advocate for Indigenous people everywhere. When he isn't working, you'll find him enjoying time with his wife and children. Guy, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Justyn.
Al Gedicks is an environmental sociologist and Indigenous rights activist and scholar. He has written extensively about Indigenous and popular resistance to ecologically destructive mining and oil projects. In 1977, he founded the Center for Alternative Mining Development Policy and assisted the Mole Lake Sokagon Ojibwe tribe in successfully resisting Exxon's proposed zinc sulfide mine upstream from the tribe's sacred wild rice beds. From 1995 to 1998, he worked with the Wolf Watershed Educational Project to mobilize public support for Wisconsin's landmark Prove It First mining moratorium law. He is Emeritus Professor of Sociology at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse and the Executive Secretary of the Wisconsin Resources Protection Council, a statewide environmental organization to educate the public about metallic sulfide mining projects in the upper Midwest. He is presently working with the Menominee Nation and the Coalition to Save the Menominee River to oppose the Back 40 project. Al, thank you for being with us.
Glad to be here.
My name is Justyn Huckleberry. I am a PhD candidate in the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, where I study how people experience displacement for conservation and mining. I had the pleasure of meeting Guy and Al through my Center for Humanities Graduate Responder Project with the Wolf River Action Committee. This is a committee of activists and professionals that Guy spearheaded to stop ongoing mineral sulfide exploration on the Wolf River and to strengthen Wisconsin's mining regulations. Through this project, I work with folks on the committee to put together a website and panel series, which you can find at wolfriveractioncommittee.com. to learn more about this really important topic. And I think Alexandra dropped this link in the chat earlier. All right, so now the best part. To start off the discussion, and before we dive directly into the film, could you each share a little more with us about who you are and the work you've been doing in Wisconsin and around the Wolf River? Guy, maybe you can get us started.
Yeah, sure. Also, Anahkwet Nitakem, Walpashia Nitotem, Kashitna Nitsky Wakin, Waiwanan Mahwāēw Sēpēw. My English name is Guy Reiter. Like Justyn said, I'm the executive director of an organization here on the Menominee Indian Reservation called Menīkānaehkem. I'd like to thank all those ones that put this film together. Of course, Dr. Gedicks for directing and producing such a beautiful film, and for Justyn and all the others that have put this together and let us come together tonight. So I really appreciate that. So I don't know if this is a compliment or what, but I was like 13 when this movie was going on. I was 13 to 15 when we finally won that. But I do definitely remember being at events, that young and not really grasping what was going on entirely, but knew that it was important. And little would I know that it affect me so much that I'd be doing the work I'm doing. Right now, Menīkānaehkem, which is the organization that I'm the executive director of, We have an 80-acre farm on our beautiful Menominee Indian Reservation. We have about 5 different initiatives: food sovereignty, energy sovereignty. We have a language and cultural group. We also have environmental justice, and one of the other things that we've been focusing on is building tiny homes for our community, and also we've helped to create a MMIW task force for the state. That's some of the things that we do here, and that takes me many places, doing all those different initiatives. But my passion has always been the earth, being an advocate for her, and trying to speak up for all those ones that can't speak, especially our winged ones, our four-legged, our insects, our animals, our plants. I always feel like they deserve to be at those meetings too and be there in full force, and I know they would, but a lot of times, you only get 3 minutes, and sometimes it's kind of a one-sided meeting, where they want you to all of a sudden be an expert and know all these things. So that's a little bit about who I am and what I'm doing. One of the more bigger initiatives that we're really starting is we're starting to dive into the rights of nature, and coming at environmentalism from a little bit different angle. I've been very active in a part of the No Back 40 mine on the Menominee River. That's something that we're still fighting, and something that we're still in the midst of. I live here right next, pretty close to the Wolf River. It's a part of who I am. It's part of where I come from, and have a lot of relatives along this river. Not only indigenous relatives, but non-indigenous relatives too. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Guy. It's always nice to hear what you're up to, and I love the work that Menīkānaehkem is doing. Alexandra posted the link in the chat, so to the audience, if y'all get a chance, definitely check out their work. Al, would you like to share a bit more about who you are and the work you've been doing?
I'm Emeritus Professor of Environmental Sociology at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, and the Executive Secretary of the Wisconsin Resources Protection Council. And the last couple of years, actually more than that, on the specific controversy over the Back 40 project on the border of Michigan and Wisconsin on the Menominee River, I got involved in that controversy when it first started back in the early 2003. But before that, I was involved with the Mole Lake tribe from the very beginning of the Crandon mine conflict in 1975. And of course, that conflict lasted 28 years. And during the course of those 28 years, there were other metallic mine, sulfide mine conflicts going on all over northern Wisconsin, including the Flambeau mine in Ladysmith, Wisconsin, the Lynn mine in Oneida County, the Pinocchio Hills mine on the edge of Lake Superior next to the Bad River Reservation. And of course, the most recent controversy at the headwaters of the Wolf River with Badger Minerals doing exploratory drilling in Oneida County. So the involvement goes back to my graduate studies in sociology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and my recruitment by the Mole Lake Tribal Council in beginning of the discovery of the Exxon Crandon deposit in 1975, when I was asked to assist the Mole Lake tribe in opposing the Crandon project. And I think it's important for people to understand the historical context of this controversy, because in 1976, the whole concept of environmental racism and environmental justice did not exist. It wasn't until the early 1980s that the environmental movement had the first beginning awareness of the disproportionate impact of industrial development projects on Native peoples. But in 1976, there were very few people in the environmental movement, let alone in the larger political organization of parties and legislatures, of the disproportionate impact of these projects on Native peoples. And so when Mole Lake decided they wanted to oppose the project, I went to several mainstream environmental organizations for assistance in helping Mole Lake oppose the project. And I was told that there was no point in opposing the project because Exxon was going to get the project done, given the power and influence of Exxon. And the fact that the Mole Lake tribe had their wild rice lake so close to the proposed mine and in danger of being destroyed was an unfortunate but a necessary price of the progress that even mainstream environmentalists bought into in the 1970s. And so at that point, it became clear that Mole Lake was going to oppose the project against all odds and against all the predictions for failure by established environmental organizations, by politicians, and of course by Exxon, that they had no chance of opposing the world's largest mining corporation, the world's largest oil corporation, at the hands or against the smallest Indian tribe in Wisconsin that had a reservation that was a fraction of the size of all the other Chippewa reservations in the state of Wisconsin. All the other Chippewa reservations had 12 square mile land bases and resources to oppose mining projects. Mole Lake had 1,800 acres because they were left out of the treaty making process in the 1800s. They were squatters in their own community for generations until the federal government granted them a small piece of land during the New Deal legislation in the 1930s to avoid their status as squatters on other people's land. And so when Exxon proposed this mine, the stakes for the Mole Lake tribe were their very survival. And that is why I became involved with the tribe, helping them to establish a technical, financial, legal defense committee to oppose the project. And over the course of 28 years, the message of resistance began to slowly infiltrate into the rest of the environmental community to the point where by the early 1990s, this issue became a statewide issue that was affirmed by all the mainstream environmental organizations in the state. But at that point, this was a 20-year struggle to establish the legitimacy of tribal opposition to a project which was seen as inevitable because of the power and influence of Exxon and the complicity of the state of Wisconsin in promoting the project because of promises of economic development.
Thanks so much for that extra introduction, Al, and the background for how you came to this work. For my second question, I'd love to hear about, the film touches on a wide range of issues around water protection. I'd love to hear about what are some of the key issues the film brings up. Maybe Al, as the director of the film, you can take this one first.
The context of the film in the 1990s was in the aftermath of a decade-long intense conflict between Indians and non-Indians in northern Wisconsin over Chippewa treaty rights, particularly spearfishing rights that were affirmed by a federal court decision in the 1980s. And as a result of that court decision, which affirmed the right of the Lake Superior Chippewa tribes to hunt, fish, and gather in the ceded territories of northern Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota, there was widespread opposition to the exercise of those rights by organized anti-treaty and anti-Indian groups that opposed the exercise of Chippewa spearfishing rights at boat landings in northern Wisconsin from the mid-1980s through the mid-1990s. The Chippewa were accused of overfishing the resources and destroying the resource base for the economy of northern Wisconsin by sport fishermen and by people that were adherents of organized racial groups like Stop Treaty Abuse and Protect America's Rights and Resources. There was no factual basis to the charge that the Chippewa were overharvesting the resource. The Chippewa were harvesting less than 3% of the fishing population, whereas the non-Indian population was harvesting 97% of the resources. Nonetheless, the Chippewa were blamed for a decline in the fishery in northern Wisconsin. And one of the important lessons of that controversy was that the non-Indian support groups like Witness for Nonviolence and some of the church groups intervened in between the anti-treaty protesters and the Chippewa to prevent violence against the Chippewa spearfishers, but also to educate the non-Indians about the real threat to the resource. The real threat to the resource was not overharvesting by the Chippewa spearfishers, but the pollution that would be generated by mining discharges into the Wolf River and other major northern Wisconsin fisheries. So when the film came out in the mid-1990s, there was already a recognition as a result of that intense controversy on the spearfishing issue that the real threat to the resource was not the Chippewa, but the mining companies like Exxon and Rio Algom. And consequently, in 1995, just a year before the film came out, the Mole Lake tribe became the first tribe in the state of Wisconsin to receive recognition by the Environmental Protection Agency that they had the sovereign right as a sovereign nation to regulate water quality which flowed through their reservation waters. And that meant that any pollution discharges from any proposed mining operations upstream from the reservation would have to meet the water quality standards of the Mole Lake tribe and the standards that were developed to protect the fragility of wild rice on the reservation. The first response of the state of Wisconsin to that exercise of tribal sovereignty was to sue the Environmental Protection Agency for having dared to grant that authority to the Mole Lake tribe. And for the next 7 years, the Mole Lake tribe were in court against the state of Wisconsin to affirm the right of the sovereign nation of the Mole Lake tribe to regulate the water quality on its own reservation waters. And one of the outstanding features of that legal controversy was that there were 4 townships around the Mole Lake reservation that signed on as friends of the court against the state of Wisconsin and in support of the Environmental Protection Agency to recognize and legitimize that Mole Lake Water Quality Authority. Finally, in 2002, the appeals of the state of Wisconsin against the EPA were rejected by the US Supreme Court, which upheld a federal district court order that affirmed the right of the EPA to recognize that authority by Mole Lake and dismissed the lawsuit by the state of Wisconsin. At that point, that was downhill for the Crandon project, because now the mining companies would have to meet essentially a zero discharge standard before a permit could be granted by federal agencies and the Mole Lake tribe. The other significant aspect of the timing of the film was that when the film was released in 1996, that was the beginning of the organized effort called the Wolf Watershed Educational Project, Wolf River Speaking Tour, which involved a coalition of 5 of the tribes that would be affected by the mining project, plus a number of sport fishing organizations, some of whom had actually opposed the Chippewa in the previous era, but had come to understand that the threat to the resource was not from the Chippewa, but from the mining companies. And of course, major environmental organizations and grassroots groups all along the Wolf River that came together for an entire year planning a speaking tour up and down the Wolf River. And the basic idea of the speaking tour was to address all of the communities that would be impacted by the discharges from the proposed Crandon mine into the Wolf River, affecting both the water quality as well as the tourist industry along the Wolf River. At the same time as we organized that speaking tour, National Rivers, American Rivers, which is a national conservation organization, declared the Wolf River one of the most endangered rivers in the United States because of the proposed Crandon mine. And at that point, Exxon decided that the discharge in the Wolf River would better be discharged into the Wisconsin River to avoid the controversy in the Wolf River watershed, and discharge their water into a less protected area of the Wisconsin River. And of course, what that meant was that the proposed Wolf River Speaking Tour, which was centered on the Wolf River, now expanded to include all the towns downstream from the discharge point and Rhinelander on the Wisconsin River. And so rather than speaking to 12 communities along the Wolf River, we spoke to 22 communities along both the Wisconsin and the Wolf River. And that became the basis for a grassroots lobbying effort to get the legislation that became known as the Wisconsin Prove It First Mining Moratorium legislation passed, because all of those communities that were now informed about the impacts of the discharges of the proposed mine on both the Wolf River and the Wisconsin River were now organized to lobby their representatives and senators in Madison to pass the mining moratorium legislation, which was the gold standard for protecting the rivers from environmental pollution. Because before any permit could be granted under the mining moratorium legislation, the companies would have to demonstrate that they mined in a sulfide ore body without contaminating either ground or surface water. And if they cannot show where they have done that, they would not be eligible for a permit. At that point, when the legislation was passed in 1998, against all the predictions that it would never succeed by seasoned politicians, the Exxon Minerals Corporation pulled out of the project and turned over the project to its partner, 50% partner, Rio Algom of Canada. And what that indicated to people that were opposed to the project was that even though it wasn't the end of the project, because the company still had the ability to go through the permitting process, they simply had to meet the requirements of the mining moratorium law. Exxon understood that despite all the money and all the political influence they were able to exert to oppose the mining moratorium legislation, they were unsuccessful in the face of a grassroots organized citizen and tribal opposition. They realized that the project was not a viable project, and that's why they withdrew from the project. That was 1998. And it wasn't a few short years later, in 2000 actually, when the same group, the Wolf Watershed Educational Project, asked the company that was now in charge of the project, BHP Billiton, one of the largest mining corporations in the world, that they should seriously consider selling the project to the Mole Lake and Potawatomi tribes, because there was never going to be a mine at that site. And over the course of the next 2 years, the company essentially gave in to the demands of the Mole Lake and the Forest County Potawatomi, and realized that they were not going to get a mining permit. And they sold the property to the combined ownership of the Mole Lake and the Forest County Potawatomi, which turned the area into a conservation zone that would never be developed by Exxon, Rio Algom, or any other company. And so the significance of that transfer of ownership from the mining industry to the Mole Lake and the Forest County Potawatomi was that it established a precedent of grassroots organized opposition that united Indians, environmentalists, and sport fishermen to oppose some of the largest and most powerful mining corporations in the world. And if you look at the literature in the mining management industry about the Exxon Crandon project, that was a turning point for the mining industry, who came to realize that they could not count on their power, influence, and intimidation factors to get a mine permitted if there was substantial, widespread local opposition to the project, especially uniting people that had been at odds in Wisconsin just in the previous decade.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that history. It was a wealth of information. Guy, would you like to respond about the key issues that this film brings up for you as well?
Yeah, it's a good explanation, Dr. Gedicks. One of the things that, it brings up for me is that, I think that, first of all, there probably could be a lot of other folks in the seat right now talking about this time that were involved and were there. Some are here, some are no longer here, but I did see a couple faces in there that kind of brought some feelings back, and definitely one being Grandpa Billy Daniels. I seen him standing there from Potawatomi, we had just lost last year, and also seeing Sparky Waka and Louis Hapatas. Those guys are pretty big influences here in our community. But I think, one of the things that I've always taken away from Exxon, especially as I got older, and definitely as I've got to become, I guess, if you want to call an environmentalist, or somebody that's just absolutely fell in love with the earth, is that, during that fight, it was so amazing to see how, we were relying on our own identity as Indigenous people, and to see that the pride that was being had there, and whether some are aware of it or not. I mean, it took a long time, I think, for our people to really be proud of who we are, and I know it wasn't easy to do that all the time through the history of the things that have happened to us as a people. So I am very proud of that, and that was something that always stuck with me, something I've always seen. I kind of been fortunate enough to grow up with it, where it wasn't necessarily opposed, to be, or it wasn't cool to be Indian. A lot of those guys that I just mentioned, grew up at a time where it wasn't so easy to be Indigenous, and I'm sure there's others that are watching this now that remember those times. But seeing them not only relying on their identity as who they are and reinforcing those identities, but also using our very own culture as strategy is quite incredible. It to me, when I see what they were doing with that water, that is so beautiful, that they acknowledge that water and bringing those waters together. And it's things, I think, like that where it slows people down in terms of their cognitive ability and the way in which they perceive things. I really appreciate the fact that when you come from that place, when you come from that cultural place, or you come from that identity place, it's more than just a strategy, or it's more than just opposition, but you're coming from a place of love, a place of caring. You know, our languages and cultures were given to us out of love for us by the Creator, and that's the way in which we should give it. And you know, all these things that we have here that are placed here on the earth for us have been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And we're very fortunate as Indigenous people to still remember some of the stories and the rules and the roles that these entities play. You know, right now we're in the time of sugar bush, you know, maple syruping right now. And that act has been going on for thousands and thousands of years here. And it goes back to the original time. You know, when I hear some of the Van Zyles there talk about ricing, you know, that very rice, you know, that they're ricing, they've been doing that for thousands and thousands of years. But when they're offering that tobacco to that water, or they're gathering, you know, in a way that is about who they are as a people, or about who we are as a people, you know, they're letting that rice know. And that rice is also acknowledging and recognizing the effort that's happening. And it's amazing to me, you know, as I kind of think about some of those things that you just seen on that screen, and they may just get a glimpse of it, but I definitely can recognize the bigger impacts. And I think that sometimes, you know, we just need to maybe slow down and think about these things as we move. And I know, as Dr. Gedicks probably does too, when you're you know, trying to oppose a project like this, you know, things move pretty quickly, and you know, it almost seems that as if the government is on their side as well, and make things a lot more difficult for us. But you know, this whole movement beginning there is quite an example to show what we can do as a community, what we can do as relatives, that we determine what goes and what doesn't go here in our community. Yes, that mining moratorium law was struck down. They struck it down in an incredible speed, but that doesn't mean that everybody on this call can't come together and we can't reintroduce it. And we must never give up. I know I remember hearing all of those ones that I spoke of, from Louis to Sparky to Grandpa Billy Daniels, talk about, as long as that ore body is in that earth, they will always want to be here, and we should never give up. We always got to stay vigilant. So that's one of the things that I think about, are some of the things that are prevalent to me in that story.
Thank you for sharing your experience. And you make such a good point that this is something that's ongoing and that we all have to fight it together. So some listeners might be familiar with the Back 40 mine in Michigan and some of the water activism around that development. For those who don't know, what is Back 40 and what are some of the other present issues of mineral sulfide mining that we face today that you both are involved in? I know you've mentioned some throughout our conversation. Guy, I know you're involved with the Back 40 fight. Do you want to take this one first?
Sure. Again, you know, this particular, I hate to even think of it as a fight, you know. I think that we're speaking up for life. You know, we're speaking up for all of those entities and that whole ecosystem that that river feeds. And I think that we can't ever forget that we as Indigenous people, especially Menominee people, that river has fed us for thousands of years. It is the epicenter. It is the place where our creation says we began as Menominees. And I remember when I first started to stand up for that river and try to do my best. I remember one of my uncles that told me, in that creation story of ours, it is that very first bear that came out of the earth at the mouth of the Menominee. and became the very first Menominee, and walked up that river and called to his brother, the eagle, and all to the other animals, the moose, the crane, the wolf. And it was the 5 animals that became the 5 principal clans of our tribe, of the Menominee tribe. But he had told me, he says, you know, that thousands and thousands of years ago, that bear came out of that earth and stood up for us. Now we need to stand up for it. And that's something that always stuck with me, you know, as we've kind of done this, the things that we've done. And I've been very grateful to be able to work with people like Dr. Gedicks and yourself, Justyn, and so many others that have put a lot of time and a lot of effort into this. But the Back 40 mine is an example of something that, you know, is also prevalent in our communities, is an outside influence, and people with money that can come in here and just get what they want and then leave. And then we're left holding the pieces, you know, and left holding up the pollution, you know, and trying to figure a way out. The Menominee tribe has existed along that river for millennia. It is, like I said, it is the creation story. It is where we began as people. And through all these years, you know, we're now in 2021. You know, there's very little of our antiquity left along that river. Everything has been taken from us. We've been forcibly removed. The buildings have gone up, you know, and they've bulldozed many things to what they call progress, to make cities, you know, Marinette and Menominee and many other small towns along that river. And this is like the last bit that we have. And you know, sometimes I think to myself is, you know, is like, when is enough enough? What more do they want? We've given everything we've given. You know, we've been forced to onto this reservation, and we've been forced to give up our homelands and our way of life. And yet, I'm still the one that is trying to cause harm, or I'm the one that is, you know, trying to hurt people, or they paint us as the bad people, as the terrorists. You know, the eco-terrorists is the new term I had heard, you know, used on our behalf. And it's unbelievable to me that we can believe in that garbage, you know, and that propaganda, that when we're simply saying, what about life? You see all these things about pro-life, or pro-life this, or pro-life that, but where are they when life is threatened? In not just human lives, but all lives. And it bothers me so much when I think about all the things that we've had to do, and now I have to, not only as a Menominee Indian, have to explain myself to people that are relatively new here, that don't even know nothing about that river. There are some of my relatives I know that live along that river who hear her and who share in the understanding of her. But our relationship with that river goes back so many years. And there's so many secrets that she knows of us, and there's so many secrets that we know of her. And every little bend on that river, there's a story of our people. And you know, I think that when is this ever going to end? You know, it's been so long, and I really look to all you ones that tuned in here tonight, that if you've been looking for a sign to get involved, or if you're already involved, you know, this is your sign. Now's the time. We can't wait anymore. We have to band together. We have to do it out of the goodness of our heart. We have to do it out of love for the earth. Yeah.
I think that's a really nice segue into the next question. We want to be sure to get to everyone's questions that are rolling in. So for the last question that I have, I'd love to hear about what folks listening can do to get involved in water protection in Wisconsin. What does y'all's experience, the past 40 years, your entire lives of water protection on the Wolf River and Menominee rivers inspire us to do or know today. Al, would you like to take this one first?
Sure. The Back 40 project is the most advanced mining project that would affect both Wisconsin and Michigan. And of course, it is on the banks of the Menominee River, which is the border between Michigan and Wisconsin. It is a metallic sulfide mine, which means that the extraction of the sulfide minerals that are mixed with the zinc and the gold interacts with air and water and becomes sulfuric acid, like Herb Bittner explained in Keepers of the Water, and releases sulfuric acid and toxic metals into the environment, both the groundwater and the surface water. The largest concentration of sulfide waste would be put less than 50 yards from the banks of the Menominee River in what is known as a tailings pond or tailings management facility. Tailings are the waste material left over after the zinc and the gold is extracted, and contains all the sulfide minerals plus all the toxic metals. And this is a facility which is the largest structure on the proposed Back 40 site on the Michigan side of the river. And the record of tailings areas in worldwide context is that the proposed design of this tailings management facility is the same design that has resulted in the failure of tailings dam facilities all over the world. The most recent one in Brazil in 2019, which released a flood of toxic mud into the surrounding community in Brazil, wiping out 270 people who lost their lives, plus the river that the people depended upon for their livelihood and their drinking water. This is the prospect that is facing the people in Upper Michigan and Northern Wisconsin. And the group that is one of the main groups opposing the project is the Coalition to Save the Menominee River. And if people are interested in doing their part to protect the clean water in Northern Wisconsin and Michigan, they can go to the coalition's website, which is jointherivercoalition.org, and click on the blue button on the website, which will send a letter to the regulators in Michigan telling them that a tailings facility so close to the Menominee River is a very bad idea. It's going to result in a catastrophic release of toxic metals into the Menominee River. And of course, the Menominee River flows directly into Green Bay and Lake Michigan, threatening the water, drinking water, and the livelihoods of 44 million people surrounding Lake Michigan and the Great Lakes. So this is an ongoing controversy. The term Back 40 is a fundamental misnomer designed to seduce people into believing that this is a small project which will have minimal environmental impact. The Back 40 project is nowhere near actual 40 acres. It's 1,087 acres. The tailings facility itself is 10 stories high and covers over 100 acres of toxic materials that will be sitting next to the Menominee River in perpetuity. And given what we know about climate change and the intensity and frequency of intense rainstorms and other kind of severe weather events, those kind of weather events dropping large amounts of rainfall on an earthen dam, as opposed to a steel and cement dam, which is what we associate with hydroelectric dams. This is a dam that is only held together by crushed rock waste material that will be inundated by these frequent weather and severe rainstorm events that will undermine the foundations of any kind of tailings facility and release hundreds of, or millions of tons of this toxic material into the Menominee River. And so the most important thing that people could do at this point is to go to that website and click on the blue button to send that message to the regulators in Michigan that we cannot allow this kind of travesty to happen next to the Menominee River. I should also add that the model of opposition that is come together to oppose the Back 40 project, which is grassroots environmental groups, concerned citizens, the Menominee tribe, and politicians that are concerned about the environmental impact, is the same coalition that defeated the Crandon project and the same coalition that defeated the Pinocchio Hills project in 2015 when there was a large iron ore mine proposed at the headwaters of the Bad River watershed, just above Lake Superior and upstream from the Bad River Ojibwa's Wild Rice Lake on the shore of Lake Superior. So this is a model of opposition that has set the international mining industry back on a number of occasions, and which has posed a significant challenge to the assumptions that simply because a company has the political influence in the state legislature to change the law or to influence politicians with campaign contributions, that is not sufficient to be successful in imposing an unwanted mining project on a local community.
Thank you, Al. I believe the link to send the letter has been put in the chat. So if you're interested in doing that, go ahead and check that out. Guy, would you like to also respond?
Yeah. You know, for me, I think it's quite simple. I think for all of you that are on this call that are you hearing my voice now, I would ask that at some point, either tonight or tomorrow, you go outside, wherever you are, put your feet upon our earth, close your eyes, and I would ask that you put yourself in creation. Try to feel her rhythm. Our beautiful mother is our greatest teacher. And it's that connection that's so very important. We can't lose that in the hustle and bustle of our lives. We can't stay on Facebook or Twitter or all these things. I believe that it's the times that we slow down is when we're our most powerful. I would also ask that at some point tonight, before you go to bed, you think of all of our water. In at least, the very least you could do is be grateful for that beautiful water, that it's supplied you today, that all of us depend so much on it, and that we need it in our lives. And I would ask that you please wake up, look around, see that our waters are threatened, our air is threatened, creation is threatened. We need to stand together, shoulder to shoulder. And I'll be there, and I hope you guys will be there too. Yeah.
I'll be there too. Thank you so much for those reminders and those tasks that, or not task isn't a good word, but those things that we should all go out and do tonight and tomorrow. Okay, so now we're moving into the Q&A. I see there's already a lot of great questions coming in. So for our first one, this is for Guy. You mentioned the Prove It First or mining moratorium law that was recently weakened. What was that law and can we get it back? Do mining laws in Wisconsin still have any teeth?
Well, I think that's a better question for Dr. Gedicks, to be honest with you.
I'd be happy to respond. The mining moratorium law was passed in 1998 and signed into law by a reluctant Governor Tommy Thompson on Earth Day on the banks of the Wolf River. And what it said was that unless a mining company could prove by example where a sulfide mine had been operated and closed for 10 years without polluting groundwater or surface water, they would not be eligible for a mining permit in Wisconsin. And for the next 20 years, no corporation that wanted to mine in Wisconsin could find a single example that would satisfy the requirements of the law. And so in 2017, Senator Tom Tiffany, also known as Toxic Tom, engineered an alliance between the mining industry and the Republican-dominated legislature to repeal the mining moratorium law. And that was effective as of 2017. And after 2017, that's when Badger Minerals initiated exploratory drilling at the headwaters of the Wolf River in Oneida County. They abandoned the project last summer because presumably they didn't find enough valuable ores to continue the exploration project, but they did not abandon any plans to continue exploration in Wisconsin. So the question is, can the mining moratorium law be reinstated? And certainly there is support among a number of, in fact, I would say most Democratic legislators in the state of Wisconsin, as well as Governor Tony Evers, to reinstate that law. The problem is that the legislature is dominated by Republicans who unanimously voted to repeal the mining moratorium law. But right now, there is a very significant movement going on in northern Wisconsin, especially in Oneida County, where Badger Minerals and other mining companies have expressed interest in the Lynn deposit and the Wolf River deposit, where over 10 cities and towns have passed resolutions against metallic sulfide mining and also in favor of asking the state legislature to reinstate the mining moratorium law. So while there is substantial opposition among the Republicans in the legislature to maintain the repeal of the mining moratorium law, there is also a grassroots movement that is growing in northern Wisconsin to put additional pressure on the legislature to reinstate that law. And of course, the significance of that grassroots movement is that the reason there was a mining moratorium law in the first place was exactly the same reason why these towns and cities are passing these resolutions, is because the people that are directly affected by these projects understand much better than the politicians in Madison about the stakes involved in metallic sulfide mining. And they are not about to be dissuaded by professional politicians who tell these communities in northern Wisconsin that it's pointless to ask the legislature to reinstate the moratorium because they do not have the political votes to do so. Well, if that was the case with the mining moratorium legislation in 1996, there would never have been a prove it first legislation passed in 1998, because over those course of those 2 years, there were grassroots efforts of lobbying from people along the Wolf River and the Wisconsin River to get those legislators who said it couldn't be done to change their minds or face being voted out of office. And that is what it is going to take to reinstate the mining moratorium law. In fact, it's quite significant that even though Wisconsin legislators have opposed or have repealed the law, in Minnesota right now, there is an effort to introduce the mining moratorium law in even more stringent set of conditions than the ones proposed in Wisconsin. And so the idea of prove it first is not something that is going to die. It is something that makes perfect sense and is in fact simply taking the mining industry at their own word. The mining industry continually tries to tell the people in these communities that they can mine safely. And all the mining moratorium law does is say, fine, show us where you've done it before and you can do whatever mining you want. If you can't show us, then there's not going to be a test case where Wisconsin rivers and lakes and communities are going to be the guinea pigs for this unproven and dangerous technology.
Thanks so much. All right, I think we have time for one or two more questions. Okay, so this one, let's see. I live in Oneida County. Can you explain why the sulfide mineralization band that runs through Oneida County continues to be of such interest for mining companies? What can we expect to see in terms of interest and exploration in the future in this area?
The sulfide mining ban, or the resolutions, I should say, opposing sulfide mining that have been passed in Oneida County, both at the township level, in the city of Rhinelander, and in a referendum last year, demonstrated that over 60% of the votes in that referendum opposed the sulfide mining at the site in Oneida County known as the Lynn deposit. And because of the ongoing interest of the mining industry in that Lynn deposit, which is, by the way, directly affecting the willow flowage, which is a very important outstanding resource water, as well as a fishery for the Lac du Flambeau tribe. There is substantial Indian, environmental, and citizen opposition to any development of metallic sulfide mining at the Lynn project or at any other site in Oneida County, including the most recent exploration at the headwaters of the Wolf River at the Shepke site in Oneida County. And one of the dramatic stories that has come out of the opposition to the Wolf River exploratory drilling by Badger Minerals is that as soon as that exploratory drilling program was announced, the Mahwāēw tribe, along with the Lac du Flambeau tribe, the Menominee tribe, and the Forest County Potawatomi tribe, mobilized their tribal membership as well as the local communities around the site to demonstrate their opposition to the project while the exploratory drilling was going on. And that undoubtedly influenced the decision of the company not to pursue exploratory drilling or any kind of mining permit at that site, demonstrating once again the importance of early and sustained citizen tribal opposition to these projects. The mining industry understands very well that they can get all the permits they want from the state regulators, but if they don't have the support of the local community, they do not have a social license to operate. And that is something that discourages investors from supporting projects where there is substantial local opposition because of the financial risks that they take when they oppose widespread opposition of mining projects.
Thanks so much, Al. Okay, and for our last question, maybe Guy, you can take this one. What are the greatest opportunities and challenges that you as a water keeper see on the horizon?
I think the greatest opportunity for me is I think that we can come together, you know, as lovers of the earth, of people of the earth, and it's not about just one color of man. As you can see, you know, it's all four of us, or all four colors are around that beautiful sacred circle. And we're going to need everyone. We're going to need everyone we can get. I think, unfortunately, you know, there's a lot of opportunity right now to get involved in environmental fights, from Line 3 to the Boundary Waters, to the Back 40 mine, and we can go on and on really. But I think the opportunity presents itself that we can kind of get back to a sort of like what I would say is maybe a center place, that we can remember where we come from as a people, and that we can stand together no matter our differences, or the way we look, and we can get something done. We can take our power back in some ways. I think that, one of the greatest tools that the opposition uses is getting us to fight among ourselves. And one great thing that that they've done to us is definitely attack our self-confidence, and attack the very foundation of who we are as a people. But there's a lot of people waking up to the fact that that's not true. We've survived. We're survivors. I'd like to see any other community go through what we Indigenous people went through. See if you make it. See what happens to you. See if you come out with some sort of dignity about yourself. If you'd be able to speak your own language and remember these things that were given to us by the Creator. We haven't forgotten. We still remember. And we're teaching our young people. We're teaching anybody willing to listen, because it must not ever be forgotten. This land here, this land and this water, it flows through me as well, just as it does all of you that now call this place home. And it's going to be up to us to protect it. There isn't anybody going to come in here and save us. None of these politicians are going to all of a sudden just wake up one day and say, you know what? You're right. All this while. And I should just not go after this money, and we should just not do this. I mean, for some of you folks that are paying attention, you just seen what happened to our brother Mahwāēw, the wolf, and how the DNR just have not had the things and the resources they've been able to do for years to be able to defend some of our wildlife. Our brother there, our brother the wolf, we just lost a lot of them in that 3-day wolf hunt. And now here they are planning another one in November without even studying that very first one. So there's a lot of opportunity. And I know somebody asked, like, what other things are out there? But I would say this is trust your heart, trust your gut, trust your spirit. It will show you. Just follow where your heart is leading you, and you'll be right where you need to be, right at the exact time you need to be there. So.
I love that. Thank you so much, Guy. It's 8:01, so this is the end of our event. I just want to thank both of the panelists so much for spending your evening with us. I believe there is an email address in the chat that folks that wanted their question answered, but we didn't quite get to it, can reach out to. It's water@mailplus.wisc.edu. Yeah, and check out those links. Feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Gedicks.
Take care.